I don't know when the world stopped feeling safe. Maybe it was the moment I saw my own mother's eyes filled with doubt when she asked if it was true. Or maybe it was earlier when I noticed the silence between my wife and I wasn't just silence anymore. It was strategy, a waiting game, a setup. But I can tell you exactly how it feels to be called a monster. To watch people recoil when they hear your name. To feel the weight of a lie so heavy it starts to bend your sense of reality. It doesn't crash into you like a car accident. It seeps in, like smoke under the door while you sleep. And by the time you wake up, everything's already burning. I remember the cold metal of the chair in the police station. I remember how dry my throat was when they offered me water. And I remember the words, "She says you hit her." That sentence didn't just punch me in the chest. It pulled the floor out from under me. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I think I laughed, actually. A short, stunned, broken laugh. And then the fear crept in. Because this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was designed. My name is Thomas Ward. I'm 37. Born and raised in Maryland. I work in logistics, manage a team of 23, and I've never laid a hand on a woman in my life. But none of that mattered. Not when the accusation came from someone like her. Claire and I met 7 years ago. She was all warmth and eyes that studied people like puzzles. You know, the type, empathetic, thoughtful, the kind who asks waitresses how their day is going and actually listens. She had this quiet magnetism. Everyone liked her. Everyone trusted her, including me. I fell in love with that version of her. The version that leaned into me during storms and squeezed my hand under tables. The version that told me I was her safe place. We got married in a small vineyard upstate, just 20 people, fall leaves and red wine. It felt right. It felt real. But love isn't a photo album. You don't get to flip through it and choose which parts to keep. And the truth is, there were signs. Tiny fractures in the glass, moments that didn't fit. But when you love someone, you learn to blink at the wrong time. You miss the way there. Voice sharpens when you say no. You forgive the fact that they cry when they lose an argument and make you feel like the villain for winning it. You call it passion. You call it complexity. You call it anything but what it is. I remember a night at a seafood place in Georgetown. It was loud, packed, the kind of place where waiters rush you and the floor sticks a little when you walk. We were celebrating a deal I'd closed at work. She'd been off all night, tight-lipped, barely touching her drink. I asked what was wrong. She said nothing. Then out of nowhere, she slammed her napkin down and hissed, "Don't raise your voice at me like that again." Only I hadn't. I hadn't even spoken above a whisper. People turned. I remember that. I remember the burn in my cheeks, the confusion, the urge to disappear. That was 3 weeks before she told everyone I hit her. The night she made the claim, it was surgical. She called her sister first, then our neighbor, then a friend from her yoga studio. Within hours, it was like a wildfire. Every call made me look guiltier. Every silence I kept made the lie louder. And the worst part? She was calm, almost relieved. I wasn't arrested, not then. But I was told not to return to the house until things were cleared. I slept in my car the first night, then a hotel, then my friend Jason's couch. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, not the woman I married, but the one who looked me in the eye and said, "You know what you did." I didn't, but I was about to find out what she had done, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the restaurant from that night, the one with the sticky floors and rushed waiters, had surveillance cameras. And they had sound, and they kept the footage. I didn't sleep the night I remembered the cameras. I lay there on Jason's couch, staring at the cracked ceiling, heart thudding with a kind of hope I was scared to touch. Hope felt dangerous now, like lighting a match in a room full of gas, but I kept replaying that dinner in my mind, the exact layout of the restaurant, the angle of the bar, the mirrors behind the counter. And then it hit me. There was a small black dome above our table. I remembered thinking it looked like an upside-down eye. Security cameras. With audio. The next morning, I drove straight to the restaurant. It was still early. The sun had barely climbed above the buildings. My palms were sweating as I walked in, pretending like I wasn't about to beg for my life. There was a manager there, Tina, mid-40s, thick glasses, expression like stone. I told her everything. Not all at once. Not the full breakdown. Just enough. Just the part that mattered. I think something very wrong is happening. And I need to know if your cameras were recording on the night of the 12th. Table 7, by the window. She didn't blink. Just asked for the time and my name. I waited. An hour, maybe 2. My stomach twisted the entire time, trying to convince me I'd imagined it all, that I'd raised my voice and forgot. That maybe Claire was right, that I had done something I couldn't remember. That's what lies do. They dig in. Tina came back with a USB drive. I shouldn't give this to you, she said, voice flat. But I watched it, and good luck. I drove to Jason's, plugged the drive into his laptop, and braced myself. Screen flickered, then there we were, me and Claire, sitting at that table. The timestamp in the corner, 7:34 p.m. For the first few minutes, we looked normal. She stirred her drink. I smiled at something on my phone. Then something changed. She shifted, crossed her arms. Her eyes narrowed, but her mouth stayed calm. I leaned in, said something, my lips barely moved. She looked straight ahead. Then came the moment I remembered, the napkin. Her voice but on the recording, it was crystal clear. Don't raise your voice at me like that again, she said. My voice came before that, soft and steady. Claire, are you okay? You've barely touched your drink. No aggression, no shouting. Just concern. And yet she snapped like I'd cursed at her. Slammed the napkin. Everyone turned. It was an act. No, it was a trap. I sat back in Jason's chair. The breath knocked out of me. There it was. The moment. Proof. Undeniable, time-stamped, unedited. And I realized something even worse than the lie. She wanted people to see it. She needed witnesses. She wanted to play the victim in public first, so when she told the story later, it would already be familiar. I felt sick, numb, hollowed out. But I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, the video looping, her words echoing in my skull. Don't raise your voice. Like a line from a script. This wasn't about pain. This was about power. I took the footage to a lawyer the next morning. A woman named Deidre, recommended by Jason's cousin. She was sharp, precise, and spoke in clipped sentences. She watched the clip once, then again. This doesn't prove everything, she said. But it proves intent. And if she made that claim on record, you've got leverage. I nodded. My hands were shaking. But, she added, we don't go public. Not yet. You let her talk first. You let her tell everyone her story. We let her commit to the lie. And so I waited. 3 days later, Claire filed a restraining order. The paperwork was clean, calculated. She claimed I was emotionally unstable, aggressive, that I'd threatened her after the dinner. She even said I'd thrown a glass in front of other people, but the footage showed everything. There was no glass, no shouting. Just her, perfectly controlled, and me confused, quiet, reaching across the table once only to pull my hand back. When she to ENCD, data was all there. But the world didn't know that yet. My coworkers were already whispering. My sister stopped returning my calls. Even my father left a voicemail that sounded more like a warning than support. Claire's story was spreading fast. It had momentum now. I could feel it taking shape like a shadow growing teeth. But I had the truth. And soon, everyone else would too. Because there was something I hadn't realized yet. something buried just beneath the footage. A pattern. A script she'd followed before, and once I saw it, the entire scheme unraveled. Looking back now, I see things I couldn't or wouldn't see then. At first, I thought this was about a single lie. A moment of emotional spite, a sudden cruelty born from a failing marriage. But the more I sat with the footage, the more I replayed her words and gestures in my mind. Something started to itch in the back of my brain. This wasn't impulsive. It was choreography. She had rehearsed that moment. Her timing, her tone, the way she didn't cry, didn't scream, just made enough noise to attract attention, to paint a picture. And then I remembered something from months earlier. A party we'd gone to, a friend's engagement. Claire had a glass of wine in her hand and spent most of the night by the fireplace, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but what stood out was what happened afterward. When we got home, she accused me of flirting with the bartender. Not questioned, accused, furious, full of certainty. "You made a fool of me," she said, shoving my jacket off the bed. "You embarrassed me." I hadn't said more than thank you to the bartender. I remember trying to explain, to stay calm, but the more reasonable I became, the more she escalated. She screamed, slammed the bathroom door, and later, when she emerged, she was sobbing, not angry anymore. "Just fragile. You make me feel invisible," she whispered, and I apologized. I didn't understand then. I thought I'd failed her. That maybe I had looked too long in someone's direction. That maybe I really was the problem. But it wasn't about that. It was about control. The accusation, the collapse, the soft whisper after the chaos. It was a cycle, and I'd been living inside it. That realization came like cold water. It wasn't just the restaurant. It wasn't just the restraining order. Claire had been rewriting our history in real time. I started digging old messages, notes she'd left me, photos she posted. I found a journal entry from a year ago, written by me, in a moment of self-doubt where I'd questioned my temper, asked myself if I was emotionally distant. She'd encouraged me to write it, said it would help. And now, I saw it for what it was. Evidence, created in advance. A part of me wanted to believe I was imagining it, that maybe I was reaching too far, trying to make sense of senseless cruelty. But the deeper I looked, the more the pieces clicked into place. She once told her best friend over the phone on speaker, when I happened to be nearby, that she'd never let a man make her small again, that she'd learned her lesson. I thought she was talking about her ex. She WSN single quotes D. Claire had been building this story for a long time. But why? What was the endgame? That's when Jason mentioned something odd, something that hadn't seemed relevant before. "She always talked about your insurance policy, man," he said, like casually. Said if anything ever happened to you, she'd be set. It stopped. Me cold. Claire had been the one who pushed me to increase the life insurance after my promotion. She even picked the company. She called it future-proofing. I thought it was smart, responsible. Now, it felt like a noose. And then, another memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in months. Claire had an old friend, Miranda. A nurse. She used to come by once in a while, but they had a falling out. Claire said it was over something petty, Miranda being too dramatic. But Miranda had pulled me aside once, before she disappeared from our lives. She said, "If Claire ever starts twisting things, trust your gut." I'd laughed at the time. Claire said Miranda was going through a rough breakup and projecting, that she'd always been jealous of our relationship. Now I wasn't so sure. The signs had always been there. Quiet, scattered, buried beneath smiles and soft apologies. The bruises weren't on my skin, they were in my sense of self. In the way I'd learned to doubt my instincts, to apologize for things I hadn't done. She didn't break me with fists. She broke me with questions, and I needed answers. That's when I made a decision. I was going to track down Miranda. If there was more to Claire's pattern, if I wasn't the first, she might know. She might be the key, and what she told me. It changed everything. It took me 2 days to find Miranda. I only had her first name and the city she used to live in. But I remembered she worked nights at St. Luke's Medical Center, and eventually, through some quiet calls and a little help from a friend who worked in HR, I got a phone number. When I called, there was a long pause after I introduced myself. Then, a soft voice. I was wondering when you'd call. We met at a coffee shop off Route 50, near the edge of town. Neutral ground. Miranda looked older than I remembered. Tired, guarded. Like someone who'd carried too many secrets for too long. She didn't waste time. She did it to me too. She said, stirring her drink slowly. Not the same story. Not the same setup, but the same pattern. I leaned in, barely breathing. She told people I'd lied about a patient, falsified charts. Sighed I was reckless, unstable. She started. Small, whispered it to colleagues, created little doubts. And when I confronted her, she cried. Made me look like the aggressor. Eventually, I transferred departments just to escape her. Why? I asked. What did she gain? She gets attention, sympathy, control. Whatever she thinks she's missing, she invents a crisis to fill. The hole. She doesn't see people, she sees roles. And if you stop playing your part, she rewrites the story to make herself the victim. I sat back, stunned. I wasn't her husband. I was a stage prop, a character in her script. And Thomas, she added, you need to understand she doesn't know she's lying. Not really, she believes it. That's what makes her dangerous. Dangerous. That word stuck with me on the drive home. For weeks I'd been trying to understand Claire's cruelty as intentional, calculated. But what if it wasn't? What if the scariest part wasn't that she was manipulating me, but that she was rewriting her own reality? I didn't sleep that night. I watched the restaurant footage again. I read the court documents. I listened to voicemails she'd left where she sounded scared, fragile, broken, and yet, beneath every word was a tone I'd once ignored. A slight delay before the tears, a breath too measured. Like someone rehearsing grief, she didn't want to destroy me. Not exactly. She just wanted the world to confirm her version of events. And I wasn't cooperating. That's when my lawyer, Deidre, called. She's pushing hard, she said. She's requesting an emergency hearing. Probably trying to accelerate the restraining order into something permanent. She's counting on you being emotional, sloppy, but we're not giving her that. What do? We let her go first, she said calmly. Let her say everything. Let her build the perfect performance. And then, I knew what she meant. We'd show the footage, the audio, the timestamps, the patterns, Miranda's written statement. And we'd let her collapse under the weight of her own script. But I wasn't after revenge. I didn't want her destroyed. I just wanted my name back. So I went quiet. I stopped responding to messages. I didn't defend myself online. I let her circle her wagons, let her audience grow. She posted quotes about survivors, hinted at trauma, wore long sleeves in photos even though it was summer. It hurt to watch. It hurt even more when people I cared about didn't question it. But I knew something she didn't. The more elaborate the lie, the heavier it becomes. And she was running out of room to carry it. Then, one night 10 days before the hearing, she showed up at Jason's apartment. She was standing at the edge of the driveway when I got home, wearing the same sweater she wore on our honeymoon. I almost didn't recognize her. Her voice was small. I didn't think you'd be here. I live here now, I said. My hands stayed at my sides. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I've been really confused and scared. And I know I hurt you. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just didn't want to feel alone anymore. She whispered. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea, not for forgiveness but for another scene. Another performance. I looked her in the eyes and said, "I hope you find peace." And I walked inside. She didn't follow. Later that night, Jason said he saw her sitting in her car for nearly an hour, staring at the dashboard, not moving. It was the first time I felt sorry for her, but I didn't reach out. I couldn't fix what she'd broken, because she hadn't just hurt me, she'd rewritten me. And now I was learning to take the pen back. The hearing was coming, and what happened in that courtroom would end it all. The courthouse was colder than I expected, sterile, almost hollow. The kind of place that pretends to care about truth, but thrives on procedure. I sat beside Deidre, my lawyer, trying to ignore the nerves crawling up the back of my neck. Claire entered like a ghost in soft colors. She wore pale blue. Hair pulled back, no makeup. Just enough to suggest sincerity without looking rehearsed. I caught a flicker of her eyes when she saw me, calm, unreadable. But beneath it, I sensed the tension. Like she knew something was coming, but not what. She'd requested the hearing to finalize the restraining order. Her testimony came first. And God. She delivered it like a soliloquy. She told the judge about our marriage, how it began with hope, and gradually turned dark. How I isolated her. How I was controlling. She described the night at the restaurant in vivid detail, claiming I slammed a glass down, leaned in aggressively, threatened her under my breath. She said I'd always had a temper, that she was scared to go home, that the only reason she didn't file charges sooner was because she didn't want to destroy my career. She even cried, not sobbing, just the right amount of tremble in her voice. A single tear, pause, swallow, continue. She looked like every woman America wanted to believe. I felt the eyes in the courtroom tightening around me. Even Deidre leaned forward slightly when it ended, and I knew why. That performance? It would have worked if we hadn't brought the truth. Deidre stood. Your Honor, we have video and audio evidence from the exact night in question. The judge's brows lifted slightly. We plugged in the drive, dimmed the lights, the room filled with ambient restaurant noise, glasses clinking, distant chatter. The camera held us in frame, me and Claire, clear as day. Then her voice. Don't raise your voice at me like that again. Then my voice. Claire, are you okay? You've barely touched your drink. Soft, measured, no glass. No threat, just concern. And then the napkin slam. Her glancing around to make sure people were watching. I watched her in real time as she watched herself. Her shoulders rose. Hands clutched the edge of the table. Her jaw tensed. The room stayed quiet for a long time after the footage ended. Then Deidre stepped forward again. We also have a written statement from a former close friend of Ms. Ward, Miranda Kessler, documenting a repeated pattern of manufactured conflict, emotional manipulation, and false accusations against others, including professional sabotage and psychological intimidation. She handed the envelope to the judge. Claire didn't speak, didn't blink. And then, just for a second, I saw it. The crack, not panic, not rage, disorientation. Like someone waking up from their own story. The judge spoke softly. Ms. Ward, do you wish to respond to this new information? She swallowed hard. Her voice was almost inaudible. I don't know what that video is. That's not what I remember. Her eyes were glossy, her body stiff. I was scared, she added. I still am. But no one was buying it anymore. The hearing ended with the order denied. Not only that, Deidre filed a motion for counterclaim defamation. The judge didn't approve it on the spot, but he didn't shut it down either. It would depend on further evidence. Claire left through the side hallway. She didn't look back, but the damage was done. Not just to me, to her. The facade had cracked in front of an audience. And that kind of break? It's hard to repair when people have seen the truth behind the curtain. But that wasn't the end. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. A woman named Danielle. She said, I saw the footage. I was with Claire before you. I need To talk to you. I sat there, reading the message over and over, because what she told me next, it proved that what I lived through wasn't just a pattern dot, it was a system. Danielle lived in Pittsburgh now. She sounded nervous on the phone, delicate, like every word she gave me was both a warning and a relief. We agreed to meet halfway in Hagerstown. Neutral, public, quiet. She showed up wearing a cardigan despite the heat, fidgeted with her sleeve, didn't make eye contact for the first 5 minutes. But when she finally spoke, her voice had the weight of someone who'd been waiting years to tell the truth. I met Claire in college. She was magnetic. Like, charming, but in this low-volume way. People trusted her fast. I did. I fell in love with her. That hit me harder than I expected. She was my first serious relationship, and I lost everything. She sipped her coffee and looked down, almost ashamed. It started with isolation. Not in an obvious way. More like she'd constantly plant doubts about people around me. Said my friends were using me, that my parents were manipulative. She needed me to depend on her completely. And I did. Her hands were trembling now. And then she accused me of cheating, out of nowhere. Screamed at me in a bookstore, said I was gaslighting her, said I was violent. She called the police, said I hit her. Danielle paused, her voice barely above a whisper. I spent a night in jail. She pulled a folded document from her purse. Charges were dropped. No evidence. But it was enough to ruin my job. My family. She never apologized. She disappeared. Found someone new and painted herself as the survivor. My stomach twisted. Danielle looked at me, eyes tired but resolute. She does this because she's broken. And she won't admit it. She builds a narrative where she's always the wounded one. The center. She needs people to orbit around her pain. And you think she believes it? Danielle nodded slowly. I think. She has to. That meeting unraveled the last thread. In me that still wanted to believe Claire just lost her way. What I realized, sitting across from Danielle, was chilling. Claire didn't set out to destroy me. She needed to. Because if she didn't, she'd have to look at the pieces inside. Herself that have been shattering for years. I never saw Claire again after the hearing. But I did hear about her. 3 weeks later, she quit her job. A month after that, her sister posted cryptically about toxic narratives finally coming undone. And one night quietly, without confrontation, I found out from Jason that she'd checked into a mental health clinic, voluntarily, apparently. The story began to collapse around her. One friend pulled away, then another. Then someone else posted anonymously about being manipulated by her. Slowly, her audience thinned. And without the applause, she couldn't keep the performance going. Jason saw her once after that outside a pharmacy. He said she looked small, tired, not theatrical anymore. Just empty. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt clean. Like I'd finally washed something off that had been living on me for too long. Months passed. Then a year, my name cleared. I kept my job. Some friends came back, some didn't. But the best part wasn't what I regained, it was what I reclaimed, my own voice. My ability to trust myself again. To walk into a room without shrinking. To love the quiet, because now it wasn't threatening, it was mine. Sometimes I still think about her. Wonder if she's rebuilding or just rewriting again. But I don't chase that thought. I let it pass, like a train I don't have to catch, because the story she tried to trap me in. I walked out of it, and I wrote my own. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, it really helps. Click the video on the screen, and I'll see you there.